Sir, we consider it to be a highly significant investigation.
We have a firestorm in the White House with shifting stories.
Who to believe? Nobody.
And contradictions, veiled threats, and a reference to tapes. But is it really fair to compare Trump to Nixon?
I welcome this kind of examination because people have got to know whether or not their president's a crook.
We'll call out contradictions from both parties on Comey and the healthcare debate. And we'll explain what happens next with Democratic Congresswoman Castor and Republican strategist Adam Goodman. Plus, Adam Putnam kicked off his bid for governor. And we'll go one-on-one to put the early Republican frontrunner to the test. This is Money, Power, and Politics. What a week. The president did not like the story his team told about Comey's firing, so he contradicted his team and changed the story. Then he appeared to threaten Comey on Twitter. Better hope there are no, quote, tapes of our conversations before Comey starts leaking to the press. Also, the Senate Intelligence Committee invited Comey to testify next week. On top of that, the president's team said that Comey had lost support from his staff. Then the acting FBI director said no, he did not. The White House also said the Comey ouster could help end the FBI investigation of the Trump campaign and Russia. Then a frustrated president, frustrated with its own press team, stepped in himself with an interview with NBC's Lester Holt, and Trump fueled the controversy by saying he discussed the investigation with Comey at dinner.
I said, if it's possible, would you let me know, am I under investigation? He said, you are not under investigation.
But he's given sworn testimony that there is an ongoing investigation into the Trump campaign and possible collusion with the Russian government. You were the centerpiece of the Trump campaign.
Well,
so was he being truthful when he says you were under investigation?
I know that I'm not under investigation. Me, personally. I'm not talking about campaigns. I'm not talking about anything else. I'm not under investigation.
When Trump fired the FBI director who was investigating his own campaign, a lot of Democrats said he's starting to look like Nixon. And Trump didn't exactly help his case when he rolled out his sidekick.
Everybody knows Dr. Kissinger.
But as it relates to firing FBI Director Comey, the Nixon analogy is overdrawn. Nixon fired the Watergate special prosecutor after devastating testimony from the White House counsel, and there were incriminating audio tapes. In Trump's case, we don't know yet where the Russia investigation is going. And Comey has made some other missteps, which we'll spell out in a moment. So it's not fair to play the Watergate card based on what we know.
What does Donald Trump know, and when did he know it?
Now, you could compare Trump and Nixon in other ways. For example, both ran and won on themes of law and order, and both despised the national news media.
They're scum. So bad, so illegitimate. They are just terrible.
I have never heard or seen such outrageous, vicious, distorted reporting in 27 years of public life.
And both had a knack for saying things that made their critics cringe.
I'm afraid he'll catch me picking my nose.
But careful comparing other politicians to Richard Nixon, because you can find ways to compare Nixon to just about anybody. Take President Obama. Obama and Nixon pushed for a health care mandate. Both scaled back manned spaceflight. Both had larger-than-life Secretary of States and had stumbling vice presidents, and both looked terrible in first debates, and both claimed executive privilege to keep records secret, and both ordered secret bombing strikes overseas, and both did take great delight in beating Romney and faced a lot of controversy along the way.
I welcome this kind of examination because people have got to know whether or not their president's a crook.
Okay, Nixon kept an enemies list. Obama kept a kill list. You get the idea. But this is not about Richard Nixon. It's about the former FBI director who gave both sides reasons to fire him. And that's fired up some striking inconsistencies from both sides.
You're stuck with me for about another 6.5 years.
Republicans and Democrats have both ripped James Comey and wanted him gone at one time or another.
Why in the world the FBI would decide to jump into an election with no evidence of any wrongdoing?
Let's start with the Democrats. First, Comey cleared Hillary Clinton, then scolded her in the process, then uncleared her days before the election, then cleared her again.
Okay, you violated these two protocols. That kind of an ambiguity bomb this close to election was a terrible lapse in judgment.
Director Comey made a great mistake.
But now many of those same Democrats who said Comey failed at his job now say Trump failed by firing him.
Mr. President, With all due respect, you are making a big mistake.
Meanwhile, Attorney General Jeff Sessions said he'd remove himself from the FBI investigation of Trump ties into Russian election meddling. But then he personally recommended firing Comey, who was leading that same investigation. The letter from the Justice Department urged Trump to fire Comey for how he handled Hillary Clinton's email investigation, while Trump himself repeatedly praised Comey last year for how he handled Hillary Clinton's email investigation.
I respect the fact that Director Comey was able to come back after what he did. It took guts for Director Comey to make the move that he made. Good job by the FBI. I have respect that the FBI has given it a second chance. The FBI, and I give them a lot of credit. I have great respect for the FBI for righting this wrong.
We're joined now by Congresswoman Kathy Castor. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Craig.
If the White House nominates, say, Mike Rogers or even Rosenstein, would you be satisfied with that?
Well, they'll have to go through a full review. But what's very concerning here is it appears that President Trump is acting in his personal interest rather than the national interest. The firing of an FBI director with shifting rationales for doing so is very concerning. I think it's undermining the confidence of the American people in the ability of President Trump to get things done for them. He's having trouble governing.
It also pulls focus from the president's agenda, but there are still efforts in the Senate to come up with its own version of health care reform. That means this is coming back probably to the House. If there is room for compromise, Congress means to come together. Where do you see, what one thing do you think Republicans and Democrats can come together on and change as it relates to health care?
You know, one of the things is to require competition. Right now in the Veterans Administration, they negotiate drug prices, and it's a requirement under Medicare, Medicare Part D, and in the individual market of healthcare.gov, it's hands off. We need to go in and use the purchasing power of Medicare and the federal government to require negotiation of drug prices, just like we do in the VA.
Prescription lobby has a lot of clout. Do you think that there are enough Democratic and Republican votes, both sides, to make that happen?
I know where the American people are. They are fed up with the high cost of pharmaceuticals. And they've got to put pressure on. They have not been shy in many of these town hall meetings to raise this issue. When I have sessions here across the Tampa Bay area, one-on-one in our libraries, this is a top concern, and I know my colleagues are hearing it too.
Congressman Castor, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Now, to understand where we're heading on health care reform, you have to look back at where we've been and how this started. And just like the Comey dust-up this week, there are quite a few contradictions and inconsistencies on both sides.
Now, I have to tell you, it's an unbelievably complex subject. Nobody knew that health care could be so complicated.
Well, first, Mitt Romney, a Republican, said anyone who can afford health insurance should have to buy it.
Everybody should have insurance. They should pay.
He said his mandate in Massachusetts should be a model for the rest of the nation.
Massachusetts is a model for getting everybody insured.
Well, former President Obama thought that Republican model of making people buy insurance was a terrible idea.
If a mandate was the solution, we could try that to solve homelessness by mandating everybody buy a house.
But then Obama latched onto Romney's concept, and after he worked it into his plan, Romney said it was a terrible idea, and that set into motion a wave of confusing contradictions.
I will act to repeal Obamacare.
Oh, no, I like mandates.
I don't have such a mandate.
Massachusetts is a model for getting everybody insured.
We wound up with a health care plan that confused even the Democrats who passed it.
I think it's very confusing. I know my time is up, but I think it's very confusing.
Among other things, Obamacare intended to cover people who cannot afford coverage by paying states to expand Medicaid. But a lot of states like Florida just chose not to do it, so millions got left behind. At the same time, a lot of younger, healthier people who can afford insurance chose not to buy it. Their premiums were supposed to help pay for all the sick people and people with pre-existing conditions. So costs shot up and choices went down. And so the new president said what we really need is health care for everyone.
Everybody's got to be covered. This is an un-Republican thing for me to say.
The uninsured person is going to be taken care of.
They're going to be taken care of.
Who pays for it?
The government's going to pay for it.
But then he embraced a plan that cuts hundreds of billions from Medicaid. And critics fear that it could also drive up costs for people with pre-existing conditions to the point that many could not afford it, which happens to be a growing complaint about Obamacare.
It's the same, almost.
Trump care is the same as Obamacare?
Yes.
No differences at all?
No, of course not.
Why would Trump just replace Obamacare with Trump care if nothing really changes?
Because where it is politics.
And public opinion has shifted and can continue to shift very quickly on this for both sides. And people's positions also may be a little different than you first may think as you peel the layers in a thoughtful back and forth like this.
People may not be able to buy insurance, but nobody's denied health care.
How do they get health care if they don't have health insurance?
You can go anywhere you want in this country and be treated if you need it.
What if you have cancer?
It's against the law. They still have to treat you. It's against the law to not treat
They have to give you chemotherapy?
Well, they have to treat you somehow, whatever is best for your situation.
Well, that would be surgery or chemotherapy.
Yeah, but they're not going to turn you. If you show up and you have cancer, they're not going to say, well, we can't treat you. Go somewhere else.
I think that's like exactly what they do.
Cleveland Johnson's a good example.
I get there just to find out that they don't accept my insurance. Some of these appointments I actually went to and they got turned down in the office.
He had Medicaid, spent months looking for a doctor to treat his cancer, and he died of cancer last month.
If I'm going through it, there's probably thousands of other people out there that go through the same thing, and it's not right.
And that's where a lot of people who favor a free market also favor helping people who need it.
If you're poor, what are you saying? People should pay for pay for you?
Well, I'm asking, what are you saying? Should they or should they not?
Well, I think that there's probably should be a pool for people that really can't afford it. I'm all for taking care of those people, and that should come out of our tax funds.
All right, coming up, Adam Putnam is the early Republican favorite in the race for Florida governor. We're going to talk health care. We're also going to put him to the test on a lot of issues. Well, Adam Putnam is the first big-name Republican to enter the Republican race for governor in Florida, and he has been gearing up for quite a while.
We're pretty happy about what we're doing in Polk County right now.
Adam Putnam got elected as a Polk County lawmaker at the age of 22. Back then, they called him Opie, and by the age of 26, they sent him to Congress.
Holy cow, look at all these people.
He came in with Paul Ryan nearly 20 years ago, and he shot up in leadership and became the third highest ranking Republican in the House.
I'm just happy to be here. They can put me in a broom closet.
But he says he got tired of the ways of Washington and set his sights on state government. He served as our Commissioner of Agriculture for the past 6+ years. And now he wants to run the state.
I am running for governor of the state of Florida. How are you?
I met Putnam at a campaign stop in Dover and sat down with him to see where he stands and what he would change.
Commissioner Putnam, thank you for your time.
Thanks for being here. It's great to be with you.
So Florida opted out of the Medicaid expansion. If you become governor, would you also consider or refuse to consider opting out of protections for people with pre-existing conditions if you have the choice?
You know, so much of this is being driven by what does or doesn't happen in Washington. Healthcare costs have consumed the state budget. It's the Pac-Man of the state budget. It's 30% of the state budget, give or take. And much of that is dictated by DC policies. So we need to roll up our sleeves and make sure that whatever changes occur in Washington are the right fit for Florida.
And if that involved taking away protections for people with pre-existing conditions, are you open to that or not open to it?
We should protect the pre-existing condition component of that. But the important thing is to have a vibrant marketplace where people have choices on who their insurer is, who their provider is, have access to affordable care, and that it represents what Florida needs. I mean, Florida's not Kansas. The challenges of our Medicaid population and our low-income population are very different, as well as the needs of our hospitals who have large emergency room visits that are uncompensated at the moment.
Do you think Governor Scott made a mistake in derailing high-speed rail in Central Florida?
Well, I think that we are going to have any number of options for moving people around in the future. You look at how fast the technology is changing. Uber has quickly disrupted the taxi cab industry. What is the potential for driverless vehicles, and how will that impact our inner cities, and how much parking is now required to be constructed or made available for downtown condominiums? This is an exciting time for communities like Tampa Bay, where you've got this major redevelopment going on, and at the same time disruptive technologies that are impacting transportation.
And knowing that, would you push for high-speed rail if elected governor, and to what extent, if so?
Well, what we have now on the East Coast is a privately funded, substantially privately funded high-speed rail that I think is a perfect test facility for, are people really willing to give up their car keys? Will people use it? Is the ridership there to justify the public expense of that technology?
An estimated $40+ million in legal bills in the water war with Georgia this year, $54 million the past couple of years, to no avail, apparently.
It's ridiculous.
Did Florida make a big mistake in suing Georgia?
I think it sounds like we made a mistake with the law firm we hired. $40 million in fees and nothing to show for it. Our Apalachicola oyster industry is in a free fall because they're not getting the water from Georgia. And if the Supreme Court can't recognize that, I can't even imagine how they would view any other option but freeing up more water to come down that river to save not only the ecosystem of Apalachicola Bay, but the jobs and the families whose livelihoods depend on that bay.
But the Corps controls the flow of water, and the Corps doesn't answer to Georgia, it answers to Congress. So
well, the Corps of Engineers does answer to Congress if they answered anybody. I've never seen much proof they answered anybody. They're sort of out, they're out of control. So there needs to be a multi-pronged strategy. We need to continue to pursue the case against Georgia in the Supreme Court. We need to get Congress to rein in the Corps of Engineers. And I would hope that we can, at the same time, be working with Georgia and Alabama to come to some sort of settlement that will save our industry and save jobs in Florida.
When you're in Congress, the debt shot up from around $6 trillion to around $14 trillion, then shot up much more from there. Do you regret any of the votes, be it the war in Iraq, be it the tax cuts, be it the expansion of Medicare, that helped the debt shoot up?
Congress is a hot, wet mess. I'm proud that I got out of there with my soul and my sanity still intact. And for me, it's always been Florida first.
Medical marijuana didn't get implemented through the legislature, but it also conflicts with the federal prohibition on marijuana. Should Florida go into special session to implement an amendment that seems to conflict with federal law?
Well, the Florida voters, by a wide margin, inserted a medical marijuana provision into the state's constitution. That should be narrowly implemented to reflect the will of Floridians who voted for that. It should be for very serious cases where it's truly medical. I don't want Florida to turn into Colorado, and I don't want Florida to turn into California. It concerns me as an employer. It concerns me as a father. We don't need marijuana brownie shops on every corner next to our gymnastics studios and our taekwondo studios and our ball fields. And so it's very important that while we respect the constitutional amendment and the will of the voters, that we do so in a way that doesn't permanently destroy the things that make Florida, Florida.
Commissioner Putnam, thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Good to be with you.
Good to be with you. And please check out our YouTube channel for interviews with the Democratic candidates in the race. Gwen Graham, Andrew Gillum, Chris King. Search for Craig Patrick's Money, Power, and Politics and click subscribe right there at the top of the page. Now, coming up, we're going to dig into the crisis in the White House with Republican strategist Adam Goodman. All right, time now for Republican strategist and crisis communications manager Adam Goodman. You know why I threw the crisis communications part in there.
I knew exactly why.
Okay, yes or no? You have to say yes or no because a lot of buzzer sounds if you don't say anything but yes or no. Is the White House fully honest?
To be determined. I think...
I heard the buzzer go off. It's to be determined.
To be determined because I think everyone wants the truth. Okay, let's start there. Everyone wants to know what the truth is, and the White House, let's just say they might have gotten decent marks on certain things in terms of taking on the system, putting bold reforms on the table, but their remarks in terms of consistent communication are not good. And that's something they're going to have to work on. Some of this you can just chalk up to saying, well, they're new at this, and so, this is kind of on-the-job training, but they've got to be better than this in terms of getting their messaging their communication straight, not just on this front, but on every front.
Optics, you've got Sean Spicer hiding in the bushes and Sanders now taking these White House briefings in a moment of crisis. What does that tell us? Is the president maybe looking at a change?
Well, in terms of communications,
yes,
I think it's long overdue. I mean, let's put it this way. This may not be the easiest assignment for any communications pro in America to work with Donald Trump, but we need clear, compelling, believable communicators around the president to be able to make sure that the message gets out. And the message here is a message that affects all of us.
Closing thought, your advice right now for President Trump would be?
Use the bully pulpit. The most important, powerful thing the president has is the power of the bully pulpit to stand on his or her own 2 feet and bring it. This is a time to bring it.
Adam Goodman, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And we'll wrap up with a closing thought on that spicy sighting in New York. Well, Sean Spicer was not really hiding in the bushes. The press had to correct that. But here is the alter ego here, Spicy, actually on the motorized lectern tearing through the streets of New York. That would be actress Melissa McCarthy prior to the Saturday Night Live showing. Continues to steal the show in late night comedy. And once more, we have a lot of ground to cover for another round of Money, Power, and Politics next week. Take care.